In this video, we will show you how to replace your intake gasket set on this Acura MDX with a 3.7 liter engine. This will be located along the top center of your engine. Let's get into it. Okay friend, let's get started on our job. To be able to gain access, we're going to have to remove the upper engine cover. This is going to be fairly easy using a flathead screwdriver. Along the front of the engine cover, you're going to find that you have two flathead plastic screws that you want to turn counterclockwise a quarter turn. Once you've turned those, you should be able to take hold of this cover and lift it up and out of position. Let's give that a quick inspection and we'll set this aside. Continuing from here, you want to make sure you remove as much debris as possible from along the top of the engine. That way nothing makes its way inside the engine once we have things apart. Use some compressed air, or if you need to, a vacuum cleaner of some sort. Let's make our way over towards the throttle body. We're going to disconnect this electrical connector that's very close to the air inlet tube. For this, you just want to press right in where it says to push, and we'll slide this out of position. Once you do have it disconnected, of course, a quick inspection for corrosion. Once you've disconnected that, the next thing we'll do is pay attention just underneath that. You can see a 10mm headed clamp holding this air inlet to your throttle body assembly. We'll loosen that. You don't need to fully unscrew it. We just need to have it loose enough that you can move this around a little bit. Now let's follow that air inlet tube towards the air filter housing. We have another 10mm headed clamp. We're going to loosen this so we can separate it as well. Just like before, you don't have to fully dislodge it. We just want to make sure it does have movement. Now that I have that loose, and as you can tell, it does flex away. Let's focus along the top of the air filter housing. It's going to be easiest to remove the air inlet tube if you remove the upper air filter housing. To do this, you just go ahead and squeeze on the electrical connector for that mass airflow sensor. We'll slide it out of place. Quick inspection for corrosion. Now along the back side, it just presses in along that air inlet tube, so we'll just pull that wiring harness right out of place as well, tuck it aside so it does not get damaged in any way. Continuing removing the upper air filter housing from the lower, you're going to find that you have four 8mm headed bolts holding it down, one in each corner. Use my 8mm with a short extension here. Take hold of the upper air filter housing and remove it from the engine compartment. Slide it right off of there. We'll set that aside. With that housing out of the way, go ahead and remove your air filter, give it a close inspection, set it aside. Now let's pay attention in the center of the air inlet hose. You can see that we have a metal tube leading to here with a clamp. We're going to squeeze that. You can use your fingers or pliers if necessary. Once you've done that, we'll just pull this out of place so we can pay attention to that throttle body. You can see it starting to come out of there now. There we are. We'll get this out of place. Quick inspection, set it aside. Let's reach right along the back side of the throttle body now. You can see the electrical connector. It does have a locking tab. It's covered by this protective boot. Squeeze it in, pull that out of place. Quick inspection for corrosion, of course. Continuing from here, we're going to dismount the throttle body from the intake. You're going to find you have two coolant hoses down along the bottom, but we don't need to disconnect those. What we do need to do is remove our four pieces of mounting hardware. You're going to find that you have two 12mm headed bolts and two 12mm headed nuts holding this in place. Now our next bolt is going to be down diagonally from there. Our last one up on the top corner here. Let's take hold of that throttle body and we'll pull it towards the driver's side, removing it from the studs that lead into the intake. Keep in mind we do have those hoses down along the bottom. We don't want to cause any damage. We just need to slide this off. There we are. Now that we have the throttle body pulled away, we're going to make our way along the back side of the intake here. You can see that we have an electrical connector. We'll disconnect this, squeeze on the locking tab. Quick inspection for corrosion. Looking just below that, you have a small hose. This has a squeezable clamp. You can use some pliers or your fingers if necessary. We'll just slide that right out of place. If you have a hard time with this hose, you could use a small hose pick to break it free. Just give it a quick squeeze, make sure it's soft and pliable. This hose is also held in place with a squeezable clamp. Using my pliers for this. Slide that out of the way. Hose pick to break this free. Just make my way around. Quick inspection. Set that aside. Let's continue a little bit more towards the passenger side. We have a much smaller hose. Once again, we're just prying this out of place, being careful not to cause any damage. There we go. Just a quick inspection of that. Let's make our way from the back side of the intake all the way over towards the passenger side, closest to where your belts are located. We want to disconnect this electrical connector. We'll squeeze in on the locking tab, gently pry it out of place. That looks good. Just above that, we have another hose, squeezable clamp. Now let's focus along the center of the intake. We're going to have to remove the center cover here. This is held in place with 10 10mm headed mounting bolts, and it also has two 10mm headed mounting nuts. There's one here, one all the way on the far side towards the driver's side of the vehicle. Let's remove all this hardware. We'll take hold of that, give it a little wiggle, and lift it up and out of here. There we are, quick inspection, and we'll set this aside. With that out of the way, we want to be extremely careful nothing falls inside here. We're going to be paying attention to the mounting hardware. Now, you don't have to necessarily pay attention to the 10mm headed mounting hardware that makes its way across. What we do want to pay attention to is the 12mm hardware. You're going to find that you have several 12mm headed mounting bolts, but you also have two 12mm headed mounting nuts. There's one over here on the passenger side. There's one all the way over on the driver's side inside of this port. As I said, when we remove this, we want to be careful nothing falls inside the engine. Let's use a small magnet here. Now that's all the hardware from in this area. Let's make our way over inside of this port. We have one bolt and one mounting nut. Continuing from here, take hold of the intake, lift it up and out of the engine compartment. Don't let anything fall inside of the engine as you continue. Now that we have that out of the way, these are the 6 ports that you want to be extremely careful that nothing falls inside. To help protect this area, I took some clean rags, rolled them up real quick, and now I'm just going to carefully start sliding them into the port. We don't want to press them all the way in, but we do want to make sure we can take hold of them and pull them out of here once we've cleaned the area. Let's start removing the intake gasket from this area. Before we do so, I can see that I have a whole bunch of debris up along here. I'm just going to start pressing that away from those ports leading into the engine here. We'll just brush it aside. Continuing on from there, let's remove this gasket. Just lift it up and off of there. There it is, friend. Moving along, we're going to remove as much debris from along the upper engine as possible here. I can see a whole bunch along the valve cover. We want to make sure there's nothing anywhere near the center. I'll use a vacuum cleaner for this. We don't want to make any debris fall inside that engine. Now let's clean this center area here, being extremely careful. We're going to use a flat blade razor, but when we use this, we definitely don't want to push anything inside of any of the ports leading into the engine. This could lead to catastrophic engine damage. We'll just use this flat blade razor, gently scrape things out and away from inside of the engine. Nothing should go into the engine. We'll just do the entire surface here. Once you feel as though you've scraped it down well enough, clean and inspect the area with a clean rag with parts cleaner directly on it. We're looking for any raised areas, anything like that has to be taken care of. You need to have a good seal here, otherwise you might have a running condition and a check engine light. You can see right along here, I still have a little bit of debris. After a thorough inspection, the next thing we want to do is use a vacuum cleaner. We're going to try to remove any debris that might have tried to fall inside of the ports. After that, we'll continue on to removing all 6 of our paper towels from inside of the ports. Let's get these out of here. As we lift them up, we're seeing if any debris makes its way out as well. We'll take care of that as necessary. Once we have all those out of there, we're going to clearly inspect inside of each one of the 6 ports, ensuring there is no miscellaneous debris that made its way inside. We'll just give this one last wipe here, and then we're going to make our way over to the bench to have a look at the bottom of that intake. On the bench, we can see the top of the intake. We're going to have to clean this, but before we do that, let's flip it over and we'll have a look along the bottom. Along the bottom, you can see the 6 ports. Those lead into the intake. This is the mating surface that matches up to the engine where we had just cleaned. So if you see any debris here, it's going to cause a leak. And once again, check engine light, running condition. We'll use our flat blade razor to give this a quick scraping. Obviously, we don't want to cause any damage. Scraping everything out and away from each one of the ports. We scraped it, let's wipe it down. Parts cleaner directly on a rag. One last quick inspection up here. We'll turn this over, have a look along the top. Continuing along the top, we need to clean several areas which will have a seal. The seal makes its way all the way around this area where the bolt holes are, but there's also another seal that makes its way along this inboard area here as well. Once we have all this clean, we'll go ahead and give it a quick wipe, obviously, a close inspection, and then we're going to also pay attention directly in the center, the belly, right along here. We've got the outer portion cleaned up. Now we'll make our way along the center here. Once again, clean rag, some parts cleaner directly on it. Now once we've completed this, let's focus on the side where the throttle body will sit. You're supposed to have a gasket in between the throttle body and the intake itself. It could be stuck in one position or the other. Either way, you need to replace it. It looks as though ours is actually stuck right on the intake here, so I'm just going to carefully pry that off of there. We'll clean up this area once again with a flat blade razor, clean it down with some parts cleaner directly on a rag. While we're in this area, confirm no miscellaneous debris fell in here. Otherwise, it's going to make its way into the engine. Just take our rag, give it a quick wipe. At this point, we've thoroughly cleaned the intake. We'll go ahead and set this aside temporarily. Now we're going to gain focus on the cover that goes across the top of the intake. We really need to pay attention to the inboard side, the area with the seal. We're going to be replacing this seal, so let's go ahead and take it out of here. Once it's out, we'll clean up the area to ensure there's no miscellaneous debris or leftover seal, and then we can reinstall a new seal in this area. You can use a small pick or just a small screwdriver. We'll carefully start pulling this out of place, being careful not to cause any damage. It's a fairly large seal. When cleaning this, we want to make sure we clean the entire area where the original seal was, and then also around the mating surfaces. Any raised areas that you can see like this could potentially make it so it doesn't seal properly. First, we'll use a flat blade razor, give it a quick scraping, ensuring there's no debris, and then we'll clean out the channel as well. Just tap that out. Parts cleaner directly on the rag here. We're going to work on those channels. We want to make sure the seal has a good area to mount into. Going on the outer channel now. In the center, we're going to clean and inspect this rubber seal. When doing this, never use any sort of parts cleaner on it. Just use a clean rag, nice and dry, and just give it a slight wipe. We just want to make sure there's no foreign contaminants on it. Double check, make sure it's still soft and pliable. It's time to install our brand new seal. You want to make sure you have it in the proper orientation. It's pretty clear that we have this area that will fit along here. But aside from that, you want to pay attention on the far end. The far end, we want to make sure we have it so the little bumped out area is facing in the same direction. If it's upside down, you're going to have an issue with the seal. It won't seal right. We'll just align everything into the groove here and gently press it in. We don't want to cause any crimps, but you do want to make sure it's properly secured. We'll make our way around again after we have everything in there. Paying close attention to this area over here. Okay. Make our way around here. Now that I have it lined up, the next thing I'm going to do is just go around one more time, confirming that it's properly seated all the way around. If it's hanging out in any area, it's going to cause an issue where you have a check engine light or a running condition. Obviously, this isn't a race. And now let's focus on removing this with a 5mm Allen head so we can replace the gasket that's located behind here. You can see one of the 5mm Allen head bolts right there. The other one's located just behind this area. Now we'll just take hold of this and give it a little wiggle. Close inspection. There's our seal located right behind there. Just go ahead and take hold of that, pull it out of place. We'll clean and inspect this mounting area as well. You know what to do. A quick scrape, make sure it's smooth, wipe it down with a clean rag. I'm just going to lift this up so I can get to it a little easier here. Just use a block of wood as necessary. Now that we're sure that's clean, we're going to pay attention to this area. This is where the seal's going to go. Looking right where my index finger is, you can tell that there's a small notch. That's for the small tab that's on the seal itself. We'll just take this, we're going to align it, align that tab with the notch that's in the plastic, and we'll press it into position. After confirming it's completely seated, let's go ahead and align this. We'll press it into position and start in both of our mounting bolts. Now when we go to put this in position, we want to ensure that we have this flap in the fully closed position so it's essentially straight up along where it would be with this seal. When you go to press this in, it's not going to necessarily want to go on all the way. You may have to carefully start pressing this a little bit just until it fits directly in. We'll make sure we have it straight up and down first to start. Get this aligned. Now I'm going to start pressing this a little bit. There we are. Now while holding this in position, you don't want to let it go because it will fall off. We'll continue on with our 5mm Allen head mounting bolts. Start them on, snug them up. Now that they're snug, I'm going to torque these to 80 inch-pounds. Now we can get this and the rest of the intake over to the vehicle. At the engine, it's time to install the intake gasket. You want to make sure you have it in the proper orientation, so each one of the 7 ports align. We have the larger 6 ports, and we also have that one smaller port, which is over on the driver's side of the engine. We'll take this and get it in position, sliding it over those mounting studs. That will make it properly aligned. Just have to slide it down. Generally, when doing this, you want to be as flat as possible. That'll help it go into place. At this point, we're confirming we can see each one of our bolt holes and each one of the ports is clear of any miscellaneous debris, and we definitely cleaned everything out from inside of this area. Let's get the lower intake in place. We'll make sure we align it with our 2 mounting studs, slide it down, double check to make sure we're properly aligned, and then we'll start in the rest of our hardware. Get this on here. As you can tell, I have both of my studs protruding up and through that intake. We can continue on with the rest of the hardware. We're going to start it all in. We'll bottom it out in a specific sequence and then torque it to 16 foot-pounds in that same sequence. We'll start with the 2 12mm mounting nuts. Obviously, we're being extremely careful not to drop anything in this area. Now let's snug them up in a crisscross manner starting from the center. Now it's time to torque it in that same sequence, 16 foot-pounds. Let's repeat that process one more time around here. Once again, starting from the center, making our way out diagonally. Now let's continue on to the intake cover here. We'll make sure we have it in the proper orientation. We want to have this area facing towards the passenger side. Just go ahead and gently set it down into place here. Should sit right on there. Continue on with your mounting hardware. We're only starting it on here. Once it's all started on, we'll be snugging it up and then torquing it to manufacturer specifications, of course. Get this hardware on here. Now we'll bottom these out, starting from the center, making our way out diagonally. Torque each of these to 8.8 foot-pounds. Now we'll just go around one more time, same torque. We just want to ensure everything's torqued properly. Over on the passenger side, let's start with the electrical connector and we'll move along to our hose. For the electrical connector, we'll just make sure we have the locking tab facing up, press it in. Listen for a click, a light tug to make sure it's secured. We'll get the hose in place now, just slides right on there. Press it on as far as you can. We'll take that clamp and put it in the original position. Make sure you can see hose on both sides of the clamp, give it a tug, make sure it's secure. If it's not secure and it slides off, use a different clamp or even a wire tie if necessary. This needs to be secured. Let's move along from here towards the back side of the intake. We'll start with the smaller hose, sliding it onto this area of the intake. If it pops out of that bracket, that's okay. Just push it back in. A quick check, make sure it's secured. Make sure it's secured along here as well. Now it's time for the larger hose. You know what to do. Press it on as far as possible, install your clamp. Now let's move towards the driver's side of the intake over here. Over here, we're starting with the hose. We're going to press it right into position here. Slide it right on there. Reinstall your clamp, of course. Move along to your electrical connector just above that. Press it in, heard a click. Now we'll make our way towards the driver's side of the intake, install the gasket, and then install our throttle body. Just get this in place. We're going to slide it over our two studs, press it right up against that throttle body. Continuing on, we have our throttle body. Let's go ahead and rest this in position. That will slide over those studs as well. Now we can continue on with our 4 pieces of mounting hardware. We have 2 12mm bolts and 2 12mm nuts. After you have all 4 pieces of mounting hardware started, snug them up and torque those to 16 foot-pounds. Let's torque those down. With the throttle body torqued to the intake, we'll continue on with our electrical connectors. Starting down along the rearward side here, we're going to press in this larger connector. Listen for a click, of course. Make sure it's secure. Let's get our air filter installed. We'll place this into the lower air filter box. Now it's time to install our air inlet tube. When we go to install this, we're going to slide it onto the throttle body. We'll also make sure that this tube slides into its port. We'll make sure the clamp is holding it in position, and we'll tighten the clamp, holding it to the throttle body as well. Just have to try to work this so it goes on evenly. And get this aligned with its port. Before you can press it in, you need to squeeze the clamp, of course. Slide that on there. Gonna have to go in a little bit further. Double check, make sure it's in the original position and properly secured. Now we're going to continue on, making sure we press this all the way onto the throttle body as necessary. With it fully bottomed out, we'll continue on with tightening our 8mm headed clamp. Take hold of that, try to pull it off of the throttle body. If it falls off, the clamp's not tight enough. Now it's time for the upper air filter housing. That's going to slide over the air filter and into the inlet tube. Once you feel as though you have it completely bottomed out and even all the way around, tighten your clamp. We'll reconnect our mass airflow sensor. Now we'll continue on tightening all 4 of our 8mm headed mounting bolts. Double check, make sure everything's properly secured. Let's connect in our electrical connector. Take this and slide it right on there. It's time to install the engine cover. Before we do, let's have a quick look down along the bottom. You're going to have 2 mounting points along the backside. Those need to fit into their rubber grommets down along the top of the intake. Once you have everything aligned, we can continue on with those 2 plastic screws along the forward side. Just have to maneuver this around a little bit here. Felt like it wanted to sit in right there. Just tap it down. A light tug to confirm it's secured. Now we'll do those screws. For these, typically I just turn them counterclockwise, just enough that it feels like they press down and in, and then I'm going to turn them a 1/4 turn clockwise to lock them in. Once you feel as though it is properly locked in, we're just going to take hold of this one last time and give it a wiggle. Okay friend, we finished our installation. The next thing that you need to do is start up the vehicle. Let it run for a short while. Make sure you have no misfire, no check engine light, close the hood, take your vehicle for a road test. Thanks for watching.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.